Did you find the guy? I'll finish you today for sure.
Are these guys allies or enemies? You can't tell from the intro. They seem to be talking about each other as if they're about to have a fight. It's weird. Oh, so they are allies. They just don't seem to be acknowledging each other's presence. That's very strange. They're not talking to each other. They're talking as if they're the only ones there. Weird. Hello and welcome to another episode of GameHammer. Today, on our 50th video, we're going to look at a classic that I adored as a kid, playing it on my Amstrad CPC. But we're not just going to look at CPC, we're going to look at a range of different versions because it's a special game. It ends Shooter Week in style, I believe, and I think it is such a good game, we should get straight to it. It's Forgotten Worlds. It was out in the arcades and it was one of those coin-grabbing, oh my goodness, you shovel so many coins into this game kind of affairs, but it had a very, very good version on the PlayStation 2 on the Capcom Classics Collection Volume 1, so that's the version we're going to take a look at first. So, PlayStation 2 has a very, very good version of the arcade classic. As you can see, it's mostly a side-scrolling shooter. You can change direction of where you're firing using the right analog stick, or the right stick as it would have been on the original arcade. You move with the left and then you've got a fire button as well. It's pretty simple and it's very good fun to play. It's very, very difficult though. This was one of those Capcom coin grabbers, and you get one life, and if you lose all of your health, that's it. You have to put more money in to continue, or hammer the continue button as it is. As you go through the game, the majority of it is these side-scrolling areas, and it's a variety of backgrounds, but the enemies, although they change in shape and sprites, it's pretty much the same all the way through. You fly around, you shoot. Why you can fly when you don't appear to have a jetpack or anything, I don't know. It's just arcade logic, what can I say? So you go through a variety of areas, like a ruined city, some space base, a weird area with lots of spikes, I don't know what that is. Ancient Egypt for some reason, which is also apparently in space. What appears to be the Egyptian version of hell, I don't know. Then you have a strange vertically scrolling section with a lot of spikes. Is this some sort of organic thing? Are you flying through a rib cage? It looks like a rib cage, I don't know. But when you get to the top, you fight a guy and then you turn up on an ice world with lots of flying oriental looking people. Are they traditional Chinese outfits? I don't know. And then you go to some sort of space hell. It's an odd game, but finally, once you've got through all of that, you get to go up this vertically scrolling section again, which is actually really hard. You would expect that's the final area of the game, where you get to fight a guy and all of his weird spiky technology. But we'll come to him in a moment, because I want to talk about the bad guys. The ruined city has a dragon in it. I'm assuming that's who's ruined it. Shoot him in the heart and he'll die, as you would expect from being shot in the heart. It's a pretty simple one, but he's got a lot of spikes that come out of him to stop you from being able to shoot, so just be careful with that because they'll kill you easily. Then you fight a giant robot suit of armour guy, and there appears to be a guy in it, so it's just some sort of giant, I think, and he'll punch you a lot, so just keep shooting him in the face. Next you get the ancient Egypt area where you fight, I think it's Horus, on some kind of flying raft thing. After that, on the same level, is something that's come straight out of Nibbles or Snake, and it really wants revenge for you crashing it into walls and things like that. So shoot that a lot and it'll die. Shooting things is the way that you basically get through everything. Your gun is your entire skill set. Then finally on the Ancient Egypt section you fight a sarcophagus that has some sort of nerve ending in it. Shoot the sarcophagus until it opens and then shoot the nerve ending inside. It's weird. It's like, look at it. It's some sort of ganglion. It's weird. Anyway, it explodes, so move on. On the area with the flying Chinese dudes is the embodiment of ice. I don't know. Is he the god of weather? I have no idea. But anyway, shoot him because he's made of crystals and they'll shatter. And then shoot his head and he'll explode. And that's it. That's all you've got to do there. Because after that, you're going to be confronted by the gods of wind and lightning. Just shoot one of them. Keep focused on one of them alone because They're twins. They seem to be linked by their souls, so if you kill one of them, the other one explodes. So basically just focus your fire on one guy and you'll win. And then we get back to the guy we were talking about earlier on. He's got odd things from the side of the screen that will fly out and attack you, and then once you've killed enough of them and shot enough of him, he'll get annoyed, throw them away, and then he'll come and attack you himself. So just keep attacking him until he dies, and then you are finished. You get to see a nice little cutscene at the end where both guys finally acknowledge each other's presence, and then a woman turns up and says thanks very much, and she's going to restore peace to the village. That's great. But here's the thing about this woman, it's not the first time we've seen her because she keeps popping up. She's the weird arms dealer in the little shop that keeps arriving. So there you go. She has been there all along, you just didn't notice. So there you see, the PlayStation 2 version is basically the arcade. It's arcade perfect as far as I'm concerned, and I adored playing it. It's one that I come back to every now and again because you can finish it in 40 minutes, so for just putting the disc in and giving it a good blast, that's pretty good in my opinion. But it's not the only version we want to talk about, so let's have a look at how the 16-bit systems work this out. It is one of those with the two controllers as well, so it's going to be quite tricky to implement. But let's have a look at how the Amiga worked out with it. You'd expect the 16 bits to be pretty good with the arcade classics, but Forgotten Worlds was a powerful arcade system, so the Amiga version is cut down, and of course it has the problem that we'll see on all of the systems where you have one joystick or one directional control, but you need two to play Forgotten Worlds. So how does it solve this problem? Simple. If you're firing, you can't move left and right because left and right get taken up on the firing by turning your gun left and right. So you will rotate the gun while firing, and that takes a lot of getting used to. It's very, very annoying. And it means that the game is severely restricted in what you can do. If there's a lot of enemies on screen, you can choose the way you fire and then move up and down, and that's fine. So you get to still dodge their weapons, but it severely restricts how you play. And actually I don't like that. The arcade version and the PlayStation version implement the controls far better. Graphically, the Amiga version is pretty good. It's a decent shooter. Once you get over the awful control decision, it's a really good shooter, and I kind of like it. But it's so hard because of that control choice. Okay, that's not brilliant, is it? The Amiga can do better in terms of graphical quality, in my opinion. I mean, it was a pretty good rendition, and it's fun to play, but it has its limitations. And I think we're going to see that a lot. In fact, I know we're going to see that a lot because two-stick affairs on something that's got one stick, you're going to have concessions. Let's have a look at how the Mega Drive worked that out, though. It's a similar problem on the Mega Drive, but not quite, because the Mega Drive has 3 buttons rather than the Amiga's 1. Well, the Amiga's 2, but the Mega Drive allows you to move left and move right on your weapons with the A and B buttons and fire with C. I think that was how I did it. There are 3 buttons anyway, and that means you can move left, right, up and down and fire at the same time. That makes the game far better. It does, however, have the problem of the controls for moving your weapon are somewhat slower than they would be in the arcade, but oh well, at least you've got that. Graphically, the Mega Drive is pretty good. It looks nice, it moves really well, and the sound is decent. The Amiga had good graphics and reasonable sound as well, but I think the Mega Drive just tops it with its clarity. The Mega Drive was actually surprisingly good with this game. It works well, the music's good, the graphics are good, and the control system was quite interesting. We're using the buttons to change your direction of fire and using the button to fire, which makes it a bit difficult to play, but I suppose if you're using the action stick, the arcade stick for the Mega Drive, that would actually work out really nicely. So I was really impressed with that. But here's the question, how does the Mega Drive's younger brother hold up with this one? Because the Master System did get a version of it. So let's have a look at that now. The Master System has a different approach again, and this is one that you won't see replicated at all on the other versions. Because the Master System only has 2 buttons, it has you firing constantly. I don't mind that because I was going to do that anyway. So instead of having a button to shoot, you just shoot all the time. You move up, down, left and right with the D-pad, and you turn your gun using the 2 buttons on the Master System controller. That's pretty good. I actually like that implementation. It works rather well. Graphically, it's not as good as the Mega Drive, but it is the best of the 8-bits as far as I've seen. So it's a pretty good game, and I enjoyed playing it. Not as good as the PS2 implementation or the arcade, but really, really well done. Okay, the Master System actually held its own quite well with that. by having a continuous fire thing instead of having to press a button, it takes away one of the issues that the mouse system wouldn't be able to get over otherwise, because it only has 2 buttons, so you can't use the Mega Drive system. But it kind of found a way, didn't it? So you've got left and right movement of the fire by pressing the 2 buttons on the Master System controller, and it just fires automatically all the time. So that's a pretty interesting way of doing it. The sprites are a little small for me, but that is typical of the Master System because it didn't do the big chunky sprites. So all in all, I think it actually worked out quite well. I'm quite impressed by that one. Let's have a look at how the other 8-bit systems worked out. Now, I couldn't do the Commodore 64, it just wouldn't work out for me. There was a version on the Commodore 64, but I couldn't get it to work, so we're going to have to leave that one out. Sorry, guys. But let's have a look at how the Spectrum held up. Now, when you look at the Spectrum, you always know it's going to have a downgrade in terms of graphical quality. But the thing about the Spectrum is, it works out quite well. I actually enjoyed playing this version. Yes, it's cut down. Yes, you have the problem from the Amiga where you hold the fire button and turn left and right to decide which way you're going to shoot, which means you can only move up and down while firing, otherwise you get problems. And yes, it is, of course, a multi-loader, but it works out really well for the Spectrum, and given the limitations of the hardware, I think they actually did this rather well, so I'm happy with it, and I enjoyed playing it. The only issue I have with the Spectrum is, of course, the shop here, where you don't get any of the background, you just get 4 options and then leave. So it's not great, but oh well. There are always limits, what can you do? Okay, as it stands, that's not a bad Spectrum game. I played a lot worse, and I actually enjoyed playing this one. It's not one I played as a kid, because my friends didn't have Forgotten Worlds on the Spectrum, but we played it a lot in the Amstrad. So we kind of got the same thing, because basically the Spectrum is a cut down graphically version of the Amstrad game. It's the same thing. The same problems with the controls are there from the Amiga, and it will stick with the other 8-bits. So under the circumstances, I think the Spectrum held its own and did very well. I actually enjoyed that one. So let's have a look at the final version that we're going to have a look at. Let's have a look at the Amstrad CPC port that I played as a kid. Now, the Amstrad version is basically a high-colour version of the Spectrum. The sprites are tiny and always annoyed me. I had this game back when I was a kid, and it always annoyed me with how small everything looked. But it's still Forgotten Worlds. It's still good, high-paced fun, and I played it all the time. I loved playing this game. It was hard as hell because you have 1 life, but I loved it, and I remember getting to level 2, maybe even level 3 one point, and being really pleased with getting that far, because it was exceptionally difficult. But again, like the Spectrum, like the Amiga, you hold down fire to move the direction of fire, and that results in only being able to go up and down while firing, which is a problem. It makes the game really hard, and I wish they'd had a different way of doing that, but oh well, that's how it is. Anyway, the game itself works really well on the CPC. It's one of the better sideways scrollers because the pace is actually held up quite well. It is noticeably slower than you would expect it to be on the arcade, but that's the Amstrad for you, and under the circumstances, it handled itself really well. Again, the shop is just symbols. It's not great, but at least you had something. Okay, there you are. As I said before, it is just a graphically enhanced version of the Spectrum, but it's not just graphically enhanced. It's actually been enhanced for the CPC. It works properly. It's not a specky port. It's an actual implementation that takes account of the CPC's hardware, so it scrolls quite well. It looks reasonably good. I remember being very impressed graphically with how this looked on the CPC when I was a kid, and it's a decent shooter. The CPC doesn't get an awful lot of decent shooters because the CPC has a problem with scrolling screens. Basically, the video takes far too much of the RAM up, so you have limitations there, and if you get around it, it causes issues. But this one did it quite well, and I was very impressed. And as a result, I actually really, really like this version. As I said, I used to play this all the time. I used to get to level 3 was probably the furthest I ever got. I would have loved to have been able to say I'd finished it, but I never could because it's so hard. But overall, I really enjoyed playing this game, and I recommend you give it a try. Which version would I recommend the best? Well, it's got to be the PlayStation 2, because like I say, it's arcade perfect, it's got the 2 sticks, which means it can implement it properly, and it's just really, really good. So if you get a chance to play it on the Capcom Classics Collection, I recommend you do that, because it is really, really good. But of the 8-bits, the Amstrad held its own, but so did the Master System, and so did the Spectrum. So go with whichever version suits you. Which computer do you like? which console do you like, go with that version, because they're all pretty good, and under the circumstances, I think they all held their own very nicely. But anyway, that's all we've got time for today, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked this, which was our 50th video, and if you did, remember to click that like button, share it with your friends so that they'll know a good game when they see it, and do subscribe for future videos, because there will be more in the future. But until next time, I've been Kirk-Robinson, you've been watching GameHammer on the Knobmouse channel, and I'll see you next week. Today's video is brought to you by my graphic novels, The Collected Life of Knobty Mouse, Volume 1, All Over the House, Volume 1, and All Over the House, Volume 2. Thank you.